Welcome to Sage at Kapiolani Community College. In this video, we'll take a look at what it takes to process your accounts receivable. For starters, make sure that when you're doing the accounts receivable setup chapter, you don't try to do the activities on pages 24, 26, 27, as those deal with sales taxes, and we're not allowed to modify the sales taxes. Also, page 43 activity seems to have a block on it. Uh, Now, where does your work, oh, also for the AR setup and processing, don't try to do anything that has sales tax class, sales tax code, or sales tax schedule maintenance. That's basically this 24, 26, 27 stuff. Now, when you're working with accounts receivable, where does your work end up? Well, a couple places to check it out. One is under reports. Under reports, you have these guys you can select from, including ones that show you details about the current status of your receivables, as well as revenues and cash receipts that you can use for cash receipts projections and cash budgeting. Now, if you, and just like in general ledger processing, where you go to account maintenance, or accounts payable processing, where you go to vendor maintenance, in accounts receivable, you can go to customer maintenance and drill down and view transactions and so forth for individual customers. Now, the audit trail still is maintained inside of accounts receivable, and as in previous submodules, you have to post everything that's active, otherwise it won't let you end the period. So one of your primary places to do input is in accounts receivable invoice data entry. And again, we use batch posting, and details about batch posting were discussed back in accounts payable chapter. Transaction codes are going to use for invoices. You don't have to put the IN in front of it. The IN will be inserted there for you. But once you assign an invoice number, IN will precede it. There are other transaction codes that you do need to enter, and if you're going to enter a debit memo, an additional charge, then you'd need a DM code, credit memo to a charge reduction, CM, a cash entry, we're receiving cash um, for an invoice, and a finance charge, which will get generated by the system. We'll have an FC beside it though. So there's some special items. You have comments. If you enter a C at the item code field, then you can go ahead and enter in just free-form text. And if you want to enter a miscellaneous charge, then you enter M at the item code field. Now, taxes are charged on many sales in accounts receivable. And so if you want the tax detail to see like the breakdown of taxes, then go to the tax detail and it'll tell you the various taxing authorities that have been charged on your invoice. Now you can't do any of the sales tax maintenance tasks that are listed in activities, so keep in mind if you're prohibited from doing an activity, chances are you're trying to do some kind of a sales tax activity. You can charge them on your invoices, you just can't modify the original um, tax amounts and schedules that they're connected with. When you do your invoice printing, then when you're at the window for printing the invoices, the batch entry window, make sure your print check box is checked off because you do actually want to print them to PDF. And if you're reprinting for some reason and you're at the accounts receivable invoice data entry window, then make sure your invoice print invoice checkbox is checked also. So when you want to print your accounts receivable sales journal to see what it is that you've entered and match that with the key, you want to correct any of your invoice errors and reprint before you do your update. Now this is the last chance for you to change any part of your entry. So if you get to the message that says accounts receivable sales journal file empty, that means you've already done all your invoices and updated them. So you can't really go back and modify those invoices that were input themselves other than through additional processes. Once you've done an update, nothing can be changed except again through additional processes. Can't go back and modify them through sales, invoice sales entry, the original one. Now, if you have a cash sale, the system needs to know it's a cash sale, so you enter the code CA, and like in accounts payable, you had to check that you could quick print. You have an invoice that you can quick print, and once you click on the lines tab, all you have to do is print invoice checkbox and make sure you run it. Now, if you have corrections to your invoices, you can enter them through charge reductions or additional charges. And if you check it out on page 24, you'll see you have a CM code and a DM code, and they're basically negative and positive invoice adjustments. Now, contrary to accounts payable, the accounts receivable system knows that CM means a reduction, so you just go ahead and enter in the amount without a negative, and it also knows that a debit memo DM is an increase, so you just go ahead and enter that as a positive amount too. So both of them get entered as positive amounts. The trick is in selecting the correct code so that it goes the proper direction for you. Now, you may or may not have an open invoice that you want to apply this to. However, if you do, then to do so, you go to the header tab and select the invoice you want to apply that credit or debit memo to. Now, after you've updated, you can change your original invoice through the adjustment process. And you go to invoice data entry, you can call it up, you get the invoice number that you already used with the window, and you can adjust the quantity up or down. And the original invoice button is only available before you actually accept the adjustment. So then you want to go ahead and print things, accounts receivable sales, the invoice, accounts receivable sales journal, and of course check your work thoroughly while you can still fix it and then go do your update. Now, repetitive invoices are invoices that uh, recurring bills that the system will help you keep track of. And same kind of concept as accounts payable, except we're going to print the invoices and then render them to the customer and collect later on them. So you have a three-stage process. You create the repetitive invoice, and then you select it and turn it into an actual invoice, and then print it and then update it. So um, when you create it, you have to define it and then accept it. And then if you need to change it, you would just modify it and accept it again. And when you select it through repetitive invoice selection, that turns it into an active accounts receivable invoice data entry item. And you can go back and clear all those and start, go back and modify the original and pull them up again through repetitive invoice selection. Um, and then you go ahead and print along with all your other invoices because it becomes a regular actual invoice. And generate your accounts receivable sales journal, and of course, fix things while you still can. Now, when you update, the updating actually changes the actual invoice counters that are keeping track of how many times that repetitive invoice has been generated and billed, because you have a set amount that you're counting down. Um, and so doing that update, every time you do the update, you're going to increment those counters. Now, when you do cash receipt entries, we can use that for collections, prepayments, any other types of cash receipts. And if it's a cash check or credit card, it's really just a two-step process. We specify the deposit and then we actually enter the receipts. So we're entering the receipts in through a window of an actual total deposit amount. So batching together our information for a deposit. So we go to main, accounts receivable main, cash receipts entry, the deposit window, and we enter in the deposit amount because that's our control total for all of our cash and check items. The credit card amount is not in there, included in the deposit total though, because it's a separate type of a deposit. Um, and then we go to the cash receipts entry window. Inside of there, the header tab tells us like the specifics about the type of deposit, and the deposit that's remaining does include whatever the credit card amount is there. So it's kind of a little bit of a disparity between that and the original control total. Now, you use the auto button for open item customers, and that's going to adjust the balance, the adjust button for balance forward customers, and that'll throw you over to the lines tab where you can go ahead and be specific about it. In the lines tab, the auto button assumes first in, first out, where you can change your discount and your cash through the discount used or the amount posted boxes. And if you want to apply to different invoices, you delete the line on the lines tab that has the invoice that you don't want and go ahead and select the one you do. And the comments field, by the way, is hidden to the right, so you need to like flesh that guy out uh, if you have comments to make. Prepayments, you enter them now and then later on you're going to apply them to an invoice. So you have no particular invoice to apply them to. So you need a unique invoice number, and if you don't have one, then the system will prompt you for one and it'll add a PP for it. So um, PP for prepayment. Miscellaneous cash receipts, you can have different types of entries on the lines tab. If it's 01 cash customers, we'll default to a GL distribution on the lines tab, and the GL account will get selected in your detail grid. If you've received it from an existing regular customer where they have existing invoice, you need to click on the lines tab and change the entry type. You can also find that located in the detail grid. When it comes to credit card receipts, unfortunately, we don't have Sage Exchange. Sage Exchange is their system for automated credit card acceptance and validation, and that costs money, and we're not actually entering data for a live company. Therefore, we don't have that available to operate as if we were a live company. So we're going to have to outsmart the system by telling it that we want to enter in the information manually, and then we go ahead and enter in the. So basically what we do for the credit cards is provide a last four digits of the credit card number and an expiration date sometime in the future from now. So in the book they'll say like 2011 or something like that. We want to say like something in 2019 or 2020 as our expiration date. So for credit card receipts, it's critical you got to select credit card as a deposit type, and is a possibility of doing reversals of credit card charges. That's a cash entry type, so it's basically a negative cash deposit amount field. Then you check number would be CC reverse. And on the lines tab, you want to select the related invoice or general ledger account for reversing out of there also, because it's two sides to the entry. And when you apply debit memos or credit memos or prepayments in your cash entry window, you do so by like typing cash type of deposit, and the check number would be apply, and then zero amount would be received. And just make sure the original invoice has an amount under amount posted. So that about wraps it up for accounts receivable processing. Hope this helps. Thanks. Bye now.